This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C-School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free Creativity Blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In today's episode, I speak with Daniel Elizalde, and we talk about the Internet of Things, creativity and innovation, and creating conceptual models. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Daniel Elizalde. Daniel Elizalde helps product teams to become highly successful at managing Internet of Things, or IoT products. He is the author of the leading blog on IoT Product Management, as well as the host of the IoT Product Leadership podcast. He is also the creator of the IoT Decision Framework, which he teaches as part of his popular course, Product Management for the Internet of Things at Stanford Continuing Studies. Daniel is a frequent speaker at IoT and product management conferences and has been featured in many, many publications. And this is a really fascinating area. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. So Daniel, thanks so much for coming on today.
James, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to meet you and have this conversation.
So share with our listeners, what's going on in your world just now?
Well, there's a lot of things going on. The IoT or Internet of Things is really taking a hold in a lot of different companies around the world. So it's keeping me really busy with, I just wrapped up my spring quarter at Stanford class yesterday, and I'm working with a bunch of clients. I'm getting ready to launch a new online course. So all these different things on how I can contribute to promoting the Internet of Things in all these different industries. So it's never a dull moment.
Now, probably many people listening will have heard of this term Internet of Things, but give us a description. What do we mean when we hear this phrase Internet of Things?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, because I think that there's a lot of confusion about what the Internet of Things is and isn't, and I want to share my specific approach. So from a very basic terms, I define it via IoT products, and then a network of these products creates this Internet of Things. And so the definition that I use for Internet of Things product, it is a product that has hardware, software, has sensors to measure real-world signals like temperature, humidity, vibration, etc. And then it processes that, and then it sends it to a central location. It's usually the cloud via the internet. And then you can use all that information to provide value to your customers. And the value part is the key, because although the technology has advanced a lot to make these applications easy to put together relative to, the last years, a lot of companies are just creating applications that don't have a lot of value. And therefore, a lot of people think of the Internet of Things as the connected toaster, or that my coffee maker sends me a message on my phone. And yeah, that is part of it, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Really, what we're talking about is leveraging this concept to address some of the biggest problems that we are seeing in the world today. The same technology and the same concept of the Internet of Things can be used to integrate renewable sources into the smart grid, or is the one that's driving smart cars, or it can help us with water or agriculture to improve the yield of the fields, etc. So this is it's an umbrella term of technologies and business models that can help us create innovative solutions to some of these problems that we've had for a while. And of course, yeah, there's a smart toaster and smart fridge, but again, that's just a little part, right?
So as I'm speaking to you just now, for example, I have a watch on, which is made by one of the well-known, actually, I can say it. They're not a sponsor. So anyway, a Fitbit. I have a Fitbit watch on, which is recording. I went out for a run this morning. It's recording all that data, using the physical device. Then the software is doing a little bit of analysis straight away on the watch, and then it's uploading it to the cloud. It's being analyzed more, and then more information is being sent down to me, and I get a regular email saying what's happening. So is that an example of an Internet of Things type of product?
Correct. That's exactly a perfect example of what I call an IoT product because it has all the components of my definition. It has the hardware and the sensors. It collects live data from your movement and probably your heartbeat, things like that. And it sends it to a centralized location in the cloud. And then the company can analyze that data through either artificial intelligence, machine learning, some other analytics process, and then give you some insights down back to either your phone or your watch. So yes, that's a perfect example. It's a consumer type product and it's a quote unquote simple type of IoT product. But yes, that is a perfect example.
And how did you get involved in this space, the Internet of Things? I mean, it feels like it's only really been in the last maybe 5 to 10 years we've started hearing about this Internet of Things. Did it really exist more before that? Was it a thing? How did you get involved in kind of creating products and teaching and coaching around this area?
Yeah, that's a funny question because I've been doing this type of work for 20 years. I tell people that I've been doing IoT before it was cool because internet is not a passing trend that is just going to go away. It is the state of the art of where we are on technology today. This ability of having hardware that connects devices and connects to the cloud uses all this latest technology. So we've been doing this kind of work for many years where we have hardware that can acquire data through sensors. We've had the ability to send that data to a centralized place in, let's say, a local database or a server. And we had the ability to send data wirelessly, but not too far. And so what happens in the last few years is that the technology has advanced to a point that it's very efficient and cheap to have very powerful sensors, very powerful computers. The cloud has taken hold, and then you have this very powerful analytic tools like artificial intelligence that can help you do something with the data. So it's this whole evolution. And I started my career working at a company doing industrial automation, and we were doing the exact same thing, just with different technology, of course, at a limited scale. And I have evolved my career working for different companies that have different segments of this. And my previous work before I became a full-time coach, I was head of products for a company doing an Internet of Product energy storage solution for the smart grid. So I was managing the whole thing for the energy industry. And then I had the opportunity to start teaching my approach at Stanford, and then decided to become a consultant, a coach, and start working with companies, advising them in their product strategy. So for me, it's been an evolution. But I mean, people that have been in it for a while, it used to be called M2M, it used to be called other things. Now we call it IoT, and that's people are starting to hear about it, but it's been out there for a while.
It sounds almost a little bit like with artificial intelligence, which has been around for a long, pretty long time. You could argue maybe from Turing, going back that far, but it didn't really get a hold until it had the ability to have big data. Because it needed that big data to be able to feed it. It was like, it just needed that information. And it sounds like the Internet of Things, a big change that happened there was almost like the size of components and the cost of individual components. I mean, I think now, I think about, boxes, they're getting shipped in different places, and they have different, like little chips within those boxes so those are communicating to know, or like a Rolls-Royce engine, for example, on a plane, and that has technology within it, which is communicating back. So it's constantly being checked at head office as well. But it would have been difficult to do some of those things until the cost of the technology came down in price to meet, so it could have kind of mass adoption.
Yeah, you're completely right. And it's a combination of cost, but also performance, because a lot of what makes this possible to transmit data around the world is the networking capabilities that we have today. So now we have bandwidth through the internet that can transfer a lot of information from these sensors up to a centralized location. And, when I started doing this 20 years ago, you had to store this information in a floppy disk and manually carrying it from one computer to the other one to analyze the results. And now we're able to move gigabytes of data a second through fiber optics to a hosted server. So it's that capacity at a price that is reasonable that allows companies to start thinking about, hey, what can we do with this? How can we be creative and innovate using this technology? Can we look at the problems that we've been having forever and apply these new concepts and come up with innovative solutions. And that's the message that I'm working with companies and through my classes.
So your work at Stanford and the clients that you have as well, and just being really knowing this area, what are some of the most creative applications that you have seen recently of Internet of Things?
There's a lot of them. I think that the creative process is very interesting, of thinking about, like I said, the problems that people already had, and then how could you build an innovative solution? So, for example, companies that do waste management, like have trucks that pick up the trash bins, they had the challenge of having to optimize their routes, because they would do the routes and the bins would not be full enough. These were the city bins. They were not full enough, so there would be a lot of wasted time and they would create traffic, etc. And so some company came along and started inserting some special chips inside the trash bins to determine the level. And then when they are full enough, they send a message to the cloud, and through GPS and mapping applications, the system automatically creates the most efficient route to pick up the trash bins. And so I thought that was a really interesting use of all these different technologies to optimize a problem that they've been having for a while. And there's super interesting applications, for example, in animal conservation, that they're putting these collars on elephants in Africa to track them and detect when they're agitated because they're being chased by poachers. Or putting some collars on cattle so that you could track when they are in heat and they need to be mated, and now you know where they are and how to track them. So interesting things. It's just an innovative twist around the problems that they have. And the contrary is also true. I've seen a lot of companies just wanting to throw this technology and try to create a problem and then try to propose a solution. And those are the companies that give IoT a bad reputation of these useless devices that have no value, right? So I think it's important to know those things.
And I'm guessing those are the companies that get a lot of attention in Silicon Valley, because they're seen as pushing in different ways, but maybe they haven't quite validated that there's actually someone that wants to buy that particular product, or that's actually a problem that people have in the real world.
Yeah, that is true. I think that's a big problem here in Silicon Valley. And there's the one aspect is throwing just technology, try to figure something out. And then the other portion is not only the companies, but I think the general media picks up on these things because they are cool. And that's what you hear about the news. There was early in January, the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, is the biggest in Vegas, and they showed a lot of IoT or connected products. And ones that went viral, so to speak, was this connected toilet. And so if that's what people are seeing in the media, then that's an impression that you get for what IoT can do. But in reality, when you start digging deeper, it's having a lot of impact in transportation, in shipping, in manufacturing, in healthcare, in energy, water production, etc. So part of my mission is to highlight those things and work with companies to figure out, do you understand the problem that your customers have? Can you solve it in an innovative way? And the reality is, for these companies, the problem is not a technical problem anymore. It's a business model and digital transformation problem. And so that's the other part where I work with companies. And hey, if you've understood the problem and you think you can do an innovative solution, what does it take to create a cohesive product strategy, a go-to-market strategy, etc.?
That reminds me a little bit. We had a guest on the show a while back, Tanzim Chowdhury, who's a professor, I think, at Cornell University. She works on things like in the biosciences and also in mental health. And I know that one of the projects that she was working on, she's very fascinated in, I think, like how Internet of Things works in terms of with mental health. And you mentioned the cattle and the sheep and the elephants. I know one of the things that they were working on there was a wristband that people could wear, that essentially, using Internet of Things, but also using machine learning as well, it got to understand when someone was in a mental state that maybe it required someone to make some kind of intervention. So, for example, it was sending information back to the doctors, and the doctors would then say, oh, it would get an alert. Okay, this person is, because by the way that they're moving, they're pacing, their gait, a whole bunch of different factors that it was looking at, it could tell that this person would actually benefit from getting a call and saying, hey, maybe you need to come in and we need to check your medication levels or whatever the thing was. So you can see, like, that's a real need. there's a real need there to a real problem. But I guess then, as you said, it's a case of like, how do you then, how do you then tell the market about this? How do you how do you enter into a market like that with a product like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. And one of the things that I want to mention based on your comment there, I think one of the things that people get confused with the hype, especially coming out of Silicon Valley here, is this idea of the different quote unquote competing technologies, right? You have blockchain and you have artificial intelligence and you have IoT. And so some of my students and my clients ask me, so should I do IoT or should I do blockchain or should I do? And the reality is that we need to stop the hype of terms to begin with. But the way I see it is that IoT, it's a concept. It's an umbrella term that focuses around this concept of acquiring data from the real world, processing it at the edge, sending it to the cloud, analyzing it, and provide more value via applications on the cloud. And so within that concept, you can have all sorts of technologies, right? So, for example, how do you acquire the data? Well, that could be a specific technology, and you can use blockchain for that. Or how do you process the data? Well, you can use artificial intelligence for that. And so all these different concepts are complementary, and they fall into this umbrella of an end-to-end IoT solution of how you actually achieve your goal by implementing this thing. So it's not an either or, and that's why I believe it's not going to necessarily go away, because a lot of things fall into this concept. If your end user is on the move and they need to have mobile application, well, their mobile is your front end for your IoT solution and so on, right? So I think that discerning the hype and understanding how these ecosystems fit together, it's important as we continue educating ourselves and other companies about what the value is and the thought process of IoT.
It's almost a little bit like an artist that works with mixed media. They'll use this type of media for this thing, and then they'll combine it with that. And they're being creative. They're not. They maybe have an expertise in one particular type of medium, but they're not beholden to that. They can take ideas from other things and play with them and experiment with them and test them and see what they create and do something interesting there. But so you've gone on this kind of really interesting journey. Obviously, I know now that you do your courses at Stanford as well. I'm interested on this journey that you've had. Was there a key time when you worked on something and a project and you gave it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it didn't quite work out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what was a lesson that you took from that experience?
Yes, I think there are too many to say here. How much time do you have, right? But I think one that I always go back to is this time where I was head of products and I had to come up with the next generation of products for our company. We're a small company, and the CEO wanted a different type of portfolio of products. And so I was tasked with figuring out what was the next thing. But the company had this philosophy that all ideas should come from within the company because we are the experts. Therefore, we need to be leading. If we go ask people, then we're not going to be perceived as experts. And so I wasn't able to talk to my customers and do the typical things you do as a product leader and leveraging research, etc. And, it was earlier in my career, I was a lot younger. I would have managed it differently today. But the result of it, long story short, is that I gave it my best. I got buy-in from everybody to build this product, spent engineering time. We launched this thing, and guess what? Nobody bought it. And so it was a big disappointment. But looking back, it was pretty obvious now that I think about it. And so for me, the aha moment there was the importance of really understanding your customers and what problem you're trying to solve for them, and then backtrack into what is it that you want to propose. Because I think that from a technology perspective, me coming from a technology background, our first instinct is just to put something together, right? And if we have a need, other people have the same need, but it doesn't work like that. And so I think that experience has affected my whole career. And if you look at my courses today, the first thing I teach, the whole first section of the course, is understanding your users. And whether it's IoT or not, without that, there's nothing. And so I think that has had a big impact in how I see things and the importance to talking to customers and learning how to talk to customers to get the information that you want. You're not asking them what they want. You're understanding the problem. And innovation comes from understanding the problem and coming up with an innovative solution, as opposed to trying to be innovative on the problem and the solution, because then nobody buys your product.
And I guess that also pulls in then ideas around design thinking. So you're kind of thinking from going through those kind of user stories and stuff there. And then also we mentioned earlier, Eric Ries, kind of lean startup, which I know now is in Silicon Valley, is almost, if Silicon Valley had a Bible, I think it would probably be the lean startup, which is good. And is a good thing, because that does talk about this idea of ensuring that you are creating something that has validation in the market as well. As you've been going along this creative journey, can you talk about maybe a key insight or light bulb moment that you had? Maybe it was something about you discovered how a new way of thinking about the work that you do, or the Internet of Things, or you just had to say, okay, this is what I want to do in my career. This is where I think I can add the most value to the world.
Yeah, for sure. And thinking back a little bit, I think one of those moments for me was when I created my IoT Decision Framework, which is the framework that I use to teach all my courses. And that really came from the realization that because I had all these years of experience, all these things made sense in my head, but I was having a hard time communicating them. And I realized that people in my company and people that I was talking to, it was really hard to say, what is this IoT thing? And what are the pieces? And it's very nebulous. And so what I did is codified an approach on how do you create a structured way to go about developing a IoT product strategy. So I broke it down in 5 layers of the technology stack, and then 6 decision areas, including UX and data, business, technology, security, and regulations. And so putting together the model and helped me understand that this is how I want to share the concept of IoT, and starting to see that people were very interested in the topic. I started blogging about it, doing talks about it. And that's when the opportunity to teach at Stanford came about. And that was a time when I started thinking, you know what, I really enjoy this part of the creative process and being able to share my message in this way. And instead of just helping one company that I'm working with of my own product, I think I can have a bigger impact if I take a step back and I work on spreading this model and spreading my knowledge so that I can help many, many companies achieve their goals. And their underlying interest of myself is that I believe that IoT can help with some of these bigger problems that I was talking about. So if I can put my grain of salt in contributing to these companies achieving their mission and solving these bigger problems, I feel like my path has a much bigger purpose.
I think that's such an important distinction. I mean, what you did there was something I see also some of the best speakers do as well, and the best teachers, where they take there's that expression, stories make people listen, but visuals make people remember. And what you were doing there by creating that conceptual model, that visual representation of what was going on in your head to help clarify it for other people, is, I think, is a good sign of a good teacher and a good speaker, because it kind of refines, it takes away some of that noise. And when we are very visual creatures, it allows just to get rid of some of the noise and just to be able to come back. And then what you've also done is you've created a common language that other people who are maybe non-technical people in an organization can discuss something as well. And they don't feel necessarily intimidated by maybe engineers that they're using words they don't necessarily know what that means, but that you can go back to a model that everyone can understand, everyone can agree on and use. I'm interested, do you have an online resource or a tool or a mobile app like Evernote, for example, that makes it much easier, or you really enjoy using for the work that you do?
That's a great question. I use all sorts of tools, actually, because I love technology, so I am always trying different things. I like tools like Trello or Wunderlist, because I like to jot down ideas as they come up in my mind. So, for example, I write a lot of articles on my blog, and sometimes I'm just walking around. It's like, oh, this would be a great idea for a post, and I have some ideas. I put it down on Trello, and I can prioritize it. I can look at it later, but it's a great way to capture those things and make sure you don't lose those ideas. And sometimes you go back to them and they were not as good as you thought, but at least you capture them, right?
But at least you've separated the editing phase out from the idea generation phase, which is a good thing.
Yes, that's right.
And if you could recommend one book to our listeners and also one record, one album, and I know both of you and I were both drummers originally as well, what would that book and that record be?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that I know you ask everybody, and I really had to put some thought on it. So for the book, I'm an avid reader. I read a ton of things. One of the things that I think really influenced my thought about the Internet of Things and pushing this idea of how this technology can solve some bigger problems is this very interesting book called 10 Billion by Stephen Emmott. It's an interesting book because it reads like a bunch of little statements and statistics. And the premise of the book is that we have about 7 billion people in the planet today, and we're struggling with the resources of the planet. And we are aiming to get, or we're growing to a rate that we're going to be around 10 billion in about 2050. So what does the whole ecosystem need to look like to support 10 billion people? How does that affect the water supplies, the energy supplies, the food supplies, housing, transportation, etc.? And so it's fascinating from that perspective, and it really sparked my need to act first, but second, the creativity of saying, okay, if I work with Internet of Things and I believe that through the solutions, we can create efficiency to eliminate waste, and I can contribute a little bit. I have this book, and it's a great message to spread around to say, hey, we need to do something about this. And I'm not saying the technological solution of IoT is the ultimate solution, but it's one little thing that can contribute. And that's what we need, right? It helped me spread my message of inviting entrepreneurs, engineers, product people to say, hey, let's focus our expertise on this type of problems that are very important for us and the world, not only, to make a quick buck here and there, especially here in Silicon Valley.
That's great. And we're going to put a link to that book. That sounds really fascinating. That's definitely one I want to read. And what about the record or the album? What would that be?
Yeah, the record, you and I, drummers, I can't really listen to music while I work because I can't get any work done. But one record that I really enjoy is this record called La Nuba from Cirque du Soleil. And it's an actual show of Cirque du Soleil. And to me, that it's a perfect example of creativity and open your mind to new possibilities. When I had the opportunity to watch that show live, it was the first time I've seen anything like that. And it really changed my perception of what creativity could be if you rethink the concept of something completely, right? In this case, a circus with the music and the acts and everything. So every time I listen to that record, it transports me to that moment of wonder, like a little kid, and saying, wow, what could we do if we take a different approach and look at things a little bit differently?
I'd be interested to think about what the possible uses of Internet of Things are for an organization like Cirque du Soleil, when they have so many touring units out all the time. That would be an interesting one to think about there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then if I want you to let's imagine you woke up tomorrow morning, but you have to start from scratch. So you have all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you and you know no one. So you have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The way I would do it, what has worked for me, I think, in the past, and I would do again, is starting a blog. I think that it's very important to get your word out and be able to communicate what your ideas are and how you can help people. And I think blogs now are a really great way to do that. One of the things that happens with my area of Internet of Things is there's a lot of people that just jump into it because it's interesting, and so there's a lot of superficial content out there, but there's not as many people that have been doing it for 20 years like myself or others. And so being able to go deeper and show that you have the depth of knowledge through blogging, that would be the first step for people to notice you. And then from there, start engaging them for maybe a little bit of coaching, or maybe start teaching a class and try to go from there. But I think the main thing would be, it doesn't matter that you think you are good at something if nobody else knows that, right? So a blog is a good way to say, hey, I have this knowledge. Anybody interested? Let's talk.
And if people want to talk, if they want to connect with you and they want to reach out, maybe to learn more about your online courses or what you do at Stanford or your coaching, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
Definitely the best place is my website, just my name, danielelizalde.com. And in there's links to my podcast and my articles and my courses, and registration for my Stanford course starts next week. So all of that is there. So danielelizalde.com.
Wonderful. We'll put all those links there for everyone to check out. People go to jamestaylor.me, and also everything we've been talking about today, we'll have links to that as well. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and learning about this area, which I knew almost nothing about. So I'm very curious now. I'm thinking about how it could be applied in the work that we're doing here. But thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be in your show. I've been listening, and you're doing a great job. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.